So we are returning now to the basic concepts in offering spiritual companionship to adult survivors of child sexual abuse by clergy and by others in authority. This 7th session is the setting, which will be offering you very practical advice. By way of reminder, or for those who are crashing the webinar in the middle, I'm a survivor of clergy abuse. I guess that gives me the odd qualification to speak to you out of my own. I offer resources on my website, teresagreen.org, on my YouTube channel called Restoring Sanctuary, and in my 2 books, Restoring Sanctuary, and in particular the book Veronica's Vow, co-authored with Father Fiorelli, which is a workbook for spiritual companions and those survivors in recovery. The focus of my work is in helping others integrate the Christian and the Catholic faith in recovery from child sexual abuse, whether by clergy or by others in authority, and to thereby promote reconciliation, both with one's past and with those who failed us as children, with those who struggle with us as adults, and with, in my case, the Church. My approach is essentially focusing on the Trinitarian nature of our very being as we reflect our Creator, and how, drawing closer to our Creator, we creatures become animated with creativity, and also to focus on the power of language in our process of recovery. Now, there are 2 sides to the approach in a setting, and indeed to the dialogue I've just described. One is how you, as a spiritual companion, whether that is as a priest or sister, as a therapist, or as a family member, don't re-victimize a victim inadvertently. And also how you can depersonalize those things the survivor may be going through, but can feel very personal, so powerful that they can kind of overrun your own personal boundaries and shake you up a little bit sometimes. I'll remind you of the trajectory of hope, where we move from being a victim to a survivor into thriving. And it's important to understand that when you're setting up your setting, when you're setting up your office or the space where you will be meeting this individual, remember, even for people who've been surviving and thriving in large sections of their life, what's going to happen is we'll slip back into a lot of old feelings before we can really resolve them. So in your setting that you're setting up, you're going to be dealing with a victim with a full fever of pain, memory, and sorrow. So when we look at the setting, let's talk about preparing the setting, the room itself. Let's look at your schedule and how you approach scheduling the meeting, if it's a meeting or if it's an encounter, how you handle the invitation and even receiving the person before they sit down and begin speaking with you. We'll just review boundaries and responses, and then we'll come to talking about a little bit about closure. In preparing, we've talked about how important it is to look into the laws and policies. For the groups I speak with, largely Catholic groups, there are very clear policies now in place. And there is a victim assistance coordinator who's available in every diocese to help you understand that, to get you the resources you need. There's also a great deal of information and resource available that you're going to want to have on hand, including things as simple as the 800 number for suicide prevention. You'll want to think through ground rules of how you approach offering spiritual companionship, whether it will be in a more formal setting, whether it will be in a more casual setting, and also how to take the first steps to encouraging somebody to see you. But what's really important, too, is that you get plenty of rest and prayer, because this is quite an encounter. People who have helped me speak about how much it's meant to their faith in their own life, but I also know that it's been hard on them, even when I've tried to protect them. Think about the room. It's very important to think about the room. First, that there'll be sufficient privacy. Now, in the Catholic Church, generally most meeting offices now have windows and in some way have some aspect that are public so that there cannot be one-on-one meetings unsupervised. On the other hand, a chair with the back to the door, to the window, for the survivor can help a sense of privacy. And also, let's take a moment and talk about triggers in a material setting. Triggers, you'll recall, have to do with our senses and how memories can be triggered by our senses and other things like emotions and memories. In terms of your setting, it's important to remember that the visual setting itself can be a trigger. I'll use the example of having been abused by clergy. Being in a setting where there are many religious artifacts could really bring back memories of my abuse as a child, and I could be catapulted back emotionally, even though intellectually I'm sitting there fully aware that I'm safe. That will make conversation and a sense of ease very difficult. Things like incense that we can smell will remind us of our past. Hearing bells, hearing hymns, even from my case, hearing the sound of children in certain kinds of hallways in old school buildings can be very disturbing. A sense of taste, a sense of touch. What's very important to understand is, on the one hand, what we touch, for example, artifacts within the church can be disturbing, but most importantly, in the setting where even as we manage our triggers well as survivors, if they're around us, it will be very difficult to open up. In many cases, survivors don't want to meet anywhere that's religious, and a coffee shop is safe. When we speak of touch, let's just take a moment and look at the bubble of space. You don't want to recreate even the tiniest trigger of a memory. So, for example, a firm but a not gripping handshake can make a big difference. A survivor is going to be very keenly sensitized to that. Certainly no great big hugs. Now, within Catholic policy, that's not supposed to happen anyway, but I'm speaking to a larger audience here. And also I understand when we expose our history, and in some cases the stories we're willing to share reveal a great amount of heroism. Other times we hide the heroism, but it still can come through. The guard, the professional card, can drop, and the desire to hug this person can be very real, human, even laudable, but under no circumstances is it acceptable. And that's similarly proximity. Some people stand very, very close, and in some settings that may be appropriate, but for a survivor, having a bubble of space around one's body is very helpful. Also, not seeming dominant. Now, in some ways, that's just being charismatic, and I'm not sure you can completely control that, but in other cases, it's how much you speak versus listen. It's how much you talk, how much you say versus how much you welcome. And remember, even physical compliments in themselves can suggest that you're looking at this person physically and in some way judging them. And in some ways that also can be viewed as awkward and can remind them of being groomed. No matter what you do with a survivor who's in a situation that makes them feel vulnerable and like they were victims in the past, physicality will be confusing, and you need to be doubly careful about being very professional. And also, other triggers can be just the emotions, and the fact is you can't control what we're feeling. When we walk into that office, we're going to feel very vulnerable. To the degree that shame still lingers with us, we're going to feel the shame that makes no sense to observers, but to have survived abuse is to bear a great deal of shame. And also, we're entering into a relationship with somebody with whom we are openly vulnerable. That's something most survivors guard against very carefully, so that inevitably we will be distrusting, we'll be guarded, even if we have seemed friendly and comfortable with you in the past. To expose this about ourselves is to make ourselves vulnerable, and to us, vulnerability can be very dangerous. So remember, by handling the setting skillfully, you can both help not re-victimize us, and also you can help depersonalize. You can help be sure that you understand it's not about you that we are reacting, but to things that you may do, things in your office that may trouble us. If you notice somebody is uncomfortable in your office, you can look around and say, is anything here triggering you and helping you? You seem a little uncomfortable. That can slow things down. You can look around the office together. You can maybe remove something or go to a different room. And it's always very smart to have a second room, for example, a conference room that may have less artifacts, that may feel more public, and so on and so forth. Now we're looking at the arrangement of the room and the fact that you want to have a situation where the survivor feels very close to an exit, feels like they cannot be trapped. It's very easy to feel trapped if you're already in a state where you're close to how vulnerable you've been as a child. You want to arrange things so that while our backs may be to the door so that we're very private, we also can get to the door, and that you're not between us and the door. Or for that matter, we're not looking out at a window at a street level sidewalk where people can see us cry. You want to make sure that you're able to listen to us without distractions, and that you're able to pace it so that we actually set the pace. My first meeting, I just went in and acted like nothing was really wrong, even though people, Father Mealy and Pat, knew I was there because I was upset. I wasn't really prepared a lot to talk. And also bear in mind things like the temperature of the room should be pretty cool. Why? Because survivors are known to show up with many layers on ourselves. I'd been a survivor who was thriving in large sections of my life for any number of years when I first walked in the room with Father Mealy. But for some reason, I couldn't help myself, and it was a warm September day, and I had many layers of clothes. I even kept my jacket on and my hands in my pocket. Quite uncharacteristic for me, but it was just what I had to do. That was the best I could do to walk in that room. And also keep refreshments, water. Have it a sense of welcome, and also a sense of pacing. When somebody walks in a room and you're checking with, are they comfortable? Would they like to hang their coat up or keep their coat on? Would they like a glass of water or not? It paces things so that the person doesn't walk in, sit down, and feel like, oh my gosh, where's the switch? I've got to talk now. And then with the time frame, here are some thoughts for the time frame you set up. You certainly want to make sure that there are no interruptions, because you don't know when this person's going to open up, when they first walk in, or very commonly about 5 minutes before it's time to leave, in part because it's the safest time to open up. You can run out the door, and if the person can't stand you, you don't have to stay and see it happen. You want to make sure that there aren't distractions. Everything from somebody knocking at the door to slip something in, from knocking or construction in the room next door, whatever those distractions might be. You want to make sure that this is not a rush. I can't tell you the number of survivors I've talked to who've met with my bishop and other bishops where they sat down for what was supposed to be a half-hour meeting that went 3 hours because the person felt so comfortable they were able to let off all the pain from their heart with their spouse, for example, present, or a family member, when both people were surprised by how much they shared. You need to keep a window of space after this meeting open, in part for your own rest and prayer and time to process, but also because you don't want to ask people to leave when they're opening up. And also in terms of advance notice, so that, again, to take down the level of anxiety, some way to reach out and to help the person know very simple things, like when you walk in the door, the elevator will be here. Now you'll want to sign in, and then you come up to this floor, and then you'll stay here at this waiting room where they'll come and get me. If you can describe things that are very basic, you're taking the unknown out of this encounter, and that does a great deal for the person and for any support member that they're bringing. You, of course, want to be timely, I can't say that enough, and to show a level of commitment to this person's well-being, as well as to be open to if this slips into overtime, so to speak. When you do offer some kind of invitation, it can be in any kind of interaction. It doesn't have to be a formal meeting. It can be over a cup of coffee. It can be after a Mass. It can be after some event, for example, a prayer service for healing. When you issue the invitation, you also want to bear in mind how exposed and afraid the person may be just walking in the door. So you may offer them to bring a support person, a spouse, a sibling, someone from their family, a very good friend. Now, in some cases, that can be the victim assistance coordinator from the Catholic diocese with whom a lot of survivors forge a relationship. That's not always the case, and not all victim assistance coordinators are set up so that they do that, but in many dioceses they can be very supportive. And like I say, help people imagine their way all the way to your office, and you can describe either conversationally or quite purposefully what your office is like, for example, oh, we'll be looking out the 9th floor window and be enjoying a sunset about that time. And also you want to keep giving options. Options are very healing. From the time we walk in the door, whether we want to hang up our coat, whether we want a soda or a water, whether we'd like this chair or that chair, how would they like perhaps to arrange the table. And for that matter, also options before they walk in the door. For example, would we be more comfortable meeting at a coffee shop, at, a local diner? And then when it comes to the point where you are receiving this person, let's just review a couple points I've made already. That you want the pacing to be calming, so when they come in you offer a number of options about how they might like to sit, where the other person may want to sit. You also want to make sure that they know where the exit is, and in fact if there's another exit to leave, make sure they know how they can walk out, make sure they know where the restrooms are, make sure you got some Kleenex on the table. Make sure the temperatures are cool, but make sure that they're comfortable. And make sure that you understand that they may be very overly covered like I was. I know somebody who keeps a shawl, a very kind of like blankety kind of shawl, lap Afghan I think they call them, in her office for people who might just want to put it around their shoulders. And also bear very carefully in mind how to respect the bubble of space of this person and anyone they bring with them. Just to review the bubble of space in this setting, you want to be careful not to have non-threatening body language. That can be including reaching across the table, pounding the table to make a point, reaching out for somebody's hand. Bear in mind the power of a very gentle, quiet voice. That's a trait of the victim assistance coordinators in my diocese that many survivors comment on regularly. I've mentioned these other points also, but bear in mind, mostly you want to let this person have a big bubble of air around them. And bear in mind, both as this person walks in this door, that there is already a shock wave going on in their own life, because they've actually come in to talk to somebody. Now, whether we were abused by clergy or anyone in authority, to share this fact at all will send shockwaves into our own spirit, because we're reaching out, we're being vulnerable, we're taking a huge risk. But also, within the original family, the childhood family where this abuse happened, some people may know. The survivor may be walking in your door having been disowned by their entire family for breaking the family secret. That's very common, sadly. And also from the point of view of the primary family, meaning any spouse, any children now, siblings, friends, that circle of people now, they too will be shaken by these facts, the degree to which the survivor will be sharing them. And usually the survivor has shared with some people in a more healthy setting than the original family. But that's not to say that survivors might not have moved into abusive and unhealthy family situations now. You need to understand it took a lot of courage, and a lot of relationships are at risk when the person walks in the door, and then when the person leaves the door, when they walk out of your office or away from you at the coffee shop, they're walking into a journey of healing that will affect all of their relationships. And it's really important to understand that the degree to which you can help this person is the degree to which you may be helping by 1, 2, or 3 degrees of separation other groups that this person will help. What you want to bear in mind is you might encounter, let's take a couple ways you might encounter a person in this setting, in these first discussions in your office. The person may come across very controlling. I can come across very defiant in terms of just responding, just to let people know I've got some power in me. Or by contrast, people can come across very servile. And you think, gee, this is not what I'm used to in dealing with this person. It's not what they seemed like when I invited them here. That's because we have been in these settings before. We have felt a sense of annihilation when we have opened up and surrendered a level of vulnerability. We may very well resort to old defenses that we're trying to set aside now, but it doesn't mean that we can't be overwhelmed by them until our recovery is well underway. It's nothing personal, and this goes to the point that hopefully you won't take it personally, but we may seem distrustful of you when you feel like, hey, I'm giving you all this time. I opened up a 3-hour window. Come on, give me a break. It's not personal. It's taking everything for that person to sit in that room and not be terrified, or to be terrified and still sit in that room with you. People often sense a level of defensiveness or almost overreaction to what caring efforts are made. In fact, even misinterpreting caring efforts. Just know that as we sit there, we're teasing apart in our own mind, in our own hearts, the difference between the grooming of an equally well-meaning abuser in the past and caring now. By you sitting there and being a person of integrity, you are letting us, by comparison, tease apart 2 very painful things. And it's going to be awkward for the survivor and quite possibly for you now and then. So success, though, as defined, is simply being present. And now, when you think about it, as you close your first meeting, as this setting does close, what you're going to want to offer are there next steps? Are there resources you can open this person to? Is there a victim assistance coordinator, for example, in your Catholic diocese who can help this person? Are there therapists? That if you don't have a victim assistance coordinator, do you have lists of therapists who are willing to work with people, maybe even on a sliding scale? What are some options this person has? You might not have all of the resources, but are they aware that there are books? Are they aware that there are YouTube videos? You can even send them over to mine. And sometimes people will offer gifts at the end, and sometimes not. Gifts were used as grooming. You're going to need to use your imagination and use your sensitivity to each individual as you bring this to a close. and always close with warmth and acknowledgement and with the responses that we will. So we've talked about the setting, and we're about to talk about the responses you want to have. Meanwhile, thanks a bunch for listening. Remember, at teresagreen.org there are lots of resources for you, survivors and their families, and there are 2 books available to you and to them that may help this process. So thanks for your time. If you have any suggestions, requests, criticisms, there's my email. Feel free to get in touch.